Hey everyone, welcome back to the deep dive. We all want to understand food and health better, right? But sifting through all the information out there can be seriously overwhelming.
It really can.
So think of this as your express lane to the most important insights from Tim Spector's Food for Life. We're going to unpack it all in a way that's fun and easy to digest.
Sounds good to me.
By the way, for anyone who's not familiar with Tim Spector,
Well, he's a bit of a rock star in the nutrition world.
he is. He's a professor of genetic epidemiology, basically studies how our genes and diseases interact in big populations. But he's probably best known for his work on the gut microbiome.
Yeah, he's a real pioneer there. And of course, he's written a bunch of bestsellers on the topic.
Exactly. Plus, he co-founded ZOE, the company behind that massive ZOE health study.
Oh, and don't forget, he got an OBE for his work during the COVID pandemic.
That's right. He was instrumental in understanding the link between diet and COVID severity.
And he's one of the most cited scientists globally. So when he talks about food and health, people listen.
Absolutely. And in this deep dive, we're going beyond the headlines and the fads. We're getting to the core of how food can be our best preventive medicine.
That's the heart of it, yeah.
So let's start with the basics, the connection between what we eat and how we feel. It's not exactly a new idea, right?
No, not at all. Even Hippocrates, way back in ancient Greece, was onto something when he said, let food be thy medicine and medicine be thy food.
Ah, wise words. And modern science is really backing that up, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
In fact, during the pandemic, Tim Spector's own team at King's College London, along with ZOE, made some pretty striking discoveries.
They did, yeah.
They found clear links between what people were eating every day and how severely they got hit by COVID. It was a real eye-opener for a lot of people.
It showed just how powerful food choices can be, even in a situation like a pandemic.
For sure. And when you look at the broader impact of diet, it's even more mind-blowing.
It is. It's estimated that poor diet is a contributing factor in about 50% of common diseases.
Wow, 50%. So we're talking about heart disease, arthritis, dementia, all sorts of cancers.
Type 2 diabetes, autoimmune conditions, even infertility. Half of those cases could potentially be prevented or delayed with a better diet.
That's a massive wake-up call for all of us.
It is. And, you know, it's not just about not getting enough to eat anymore. We've actually got a bigger problem on our hands now.
Oh, you mean the global overnutrition crisis?
Exactly. For the first time in history, there are more people who are overweight or obese than those who are underweight.
It's a huge shift, and it's driving so many health problems.
Yeah, almost every common disease has some link to our diet, either directly or through complications from being overweight.
So if we want to take control of our health, our food choices are pretty much the most powerful tool we have.
There's no doubt about it. Spector really emphasizes that our daily food decisions are the single biggest modifiable factor in preventing these diseases.
It's actually quite empowering when you think about it.
It is.
Now, for years, we've been bombarded with messages about individual nutrients, eat this for more vitamin C, that for more iron. Where did that obsession with nutrients come from?
Well, after World War II, there was a lot of malnutrition and food rationing going on. Deficiencies were common, and people were getting sick from things like scurvy.
Oh, right, the vitamin C deficiency.
Yeah. So naturally, scientists focused on identifying and fixing those specific deficiencies. They wanted to make sure people were getting enough of the essential vitamins and minerals to survive.
It makes sense in that context, but it feels like that nutrient-focused thinking stuck around, even though we're not facing those same deficiencies anymore.
It did, and now you've got this huge supplement industry worth billions telling us we need to top up this nutrient or that one.
But Spector actually argues that most healthy people who eat a varied diet don't need those supplements.
Yeah, he's not a big fan of them.
And he has a point. We're so focused on these isolated components when the reality is that food is incredibly complex.
Oh, absolutely. Spector takes what he calls a big data approach to nutrition. He looks at the whole picture.
So instead of just zeroing in on one nutrient, he's looking at the thousands of chemicals present in whole foods.
Exactly. He uses garlic as an example. We all know about allicin, the compound that gives it that pungent smell.
Yeah, that's what we usually associate with garlic.
But garlic actually contains over 4,000 other chemical compounds. So focusing on just allicin totally misses the bigger picture.
Wow, 4,000. It's like trying to understand a symphony by listening to just one note.
Exactly. It's the interplay of all those compounds that matters.
So this whole idea of chasing specific nutrients might be leading us astray, especially when it comes to ultra-processed foods, those UPFs we hear so much about.
Yeah, that's where it gets really tricky. We've become so fixated on the fat, sugar, and salt content of foods.
Right, those are the things we usually look at on the nutrition label.
But Spector says that's not the whole story. The real problem with UPFs is that they're not real food anymore. They're made up of all these chemicals that don't exist in nature.
So it's not just about a bag of chips having too much salt. It's about what those chips are actually made of.
Exactly. It's about all the artificial ingredients and additives that have been pumped into them.
And he says these UPFs actually make us feel less full, so we end up eating more.
Yeah, they mess with our natural satiety signals.
Plus, they're linked to a whole bunch of diseases and even early death.
That's the scariest part. And kids are particularly vulnerable because their diets are often loaded with UQFs.
It's a real worry, and I remember the UK National Food Strategy report was pretty damning about these foods, wasn't it?
It was. The 2021 report, which Spector contributed to, actually recommended a tax on UPFs, especially those snack foods that are low in nutrients.
They wanted to discourage people from eating them and improve public health.
Yeah, but sadly that recommendation got shot down.
It's a shame because we're facing a food health crisis, and it seems like we need to be more proactive.
Absolutely. We can't just wait for governments to act. We need to take responsibility for our own health.
And that's where knowledge comes in. Spector's book is all about empowering us to make informed choices.
He wants us to look beyond those misleading labels and marketing tricks and really understand what's in our food.
He even gives us food tables in the book to help with grocery shopping.
Yeah, practical stuff we can use every week. It's about becoming our own food experts.
So let's talk about the gut microbiome for a bit. This is such a fascinating area, and it's so closely tied to our overall health.
Oh, it's incredibly important.
Our immune system is amazing, right? It fights off infections. It keeps us from having crazy allergic reactions.
It even patrols our bodies, looking for cancer cells.
But here's the thing. Our gut microbiome, all those trillions of bacteria and other microbes in our digestive system, they have a huge impact on how well our immune system works.
They really do. They're like the behind-the-scenes crew making sure everything runs smoothly.
And Spector highlights this connection with some really powerful research. He led the PMM study, which looked at patients with metastatic melanoma.
Oh yeah, that was a groundbreaking study.
They were undergoing immunotherapy, and the study found that their diets actually affected how well the treatment worked.
It was incredible. The patients who ate a healthier diet had double the chances of survival after a year.
Double. That's mind-blowing. It shows how food can be medicine, even in the fight against cancer.
It gives scientific weight to all those stories we hear about certain foods, like turmeric having anti-cancer properties.
Right. It's like maybe there's more to this than we thought.
Exactly. We need to keep an open mind about the links between diet and disease.
Now, Spector also talks about how we tend to overlook the role of our senses, especially flavor and aroma, in our food choices.
It's true, we get so caught up in what things look like and how they taste.
But our sense of smell is incredibly powerful, and it can tell us a lot about the freshness and quality of food.
Think about that amazing smell of ripe strawberries, or the earthy aroma of fresh bread.
Makes your mouth water just thinking about it.
And the aroma of food is incredibly complex. We're talking thousands of different aromatic chemicals that contribute to what we perceive as flavor.
Wow, it's like a whole symphony for our noses.
It is, and our tongue is no slouch either. It can instantly detect bitter tastes, which often signal the presence of potentially toxic compounds in plants.
Ah, that makes sense. It's like a built-in warning system.
Yeah, a protective mechanism that's been honed over millions of years.
But then why do we sometimes actually crave bitter and sour tastes? Think about dark chocolate or coffee or pickles.
It's a good question. One theory is that our ancestors, who couldn't produce their own vitamin C, developed a liking for sour foods because they were a good source of it.
Like citrus fruits, for example.
Yeah, and there's also the idea that we evolved to enjoy the sourness of fermented foods because they're beneficial for our gut microbes.
So maybe we've learned to appreciate those tastes in moderation because they signal something good for our bodies.
That's the thinking.
Now, let's talk about those plant defense chemicals, the polyphenols that seem to be everywhere these days. What's the deal with them?
Well, plants have to defend themselves, right? So they produce a whole arsenal of chemicals to protect themselves from insects, animals, and even things like UV radiation.
It's like their own little chemical warfare system.
Exactly. And polyphenols are one of the main groups of these protective compounds.
And they're not evenly distributed throughout the plant, are they?
Nope. The parts that are growing the fastest, like young leaf and sprout trips, tend to have the highest concentrations.
It's like they're putting all their energy into defending those vulnerable parts.
Exactly. And those parts often have the most intense colors and flavors.
So those vibrant colors we see in fruits and vegetables are actually a sign of these beneficial compounds.
Yeah, it's not just for show. The deep purple of blueberries, the bright red of tomatoes, those are all indicators of polyphenols at work.
I love that. Now, let's move on to blood sugar. We hear so much about keeping our blood sugar stable, but it can be confusing.
It can be, yeah.
So what does Spector say about blood sugar peaks and dips?
He explains that short-term rises in blood sugar after a meal are perfectly normal. That's just our bodies doing their thing.
It's how we get energy from food.
Right. But what's not good is when our blood sugar spikes dramatically and then crashes. Those big swings can lead to intense hunger and overeating later on.
And it's not just about the sugar content of food, is it?
No, it's also about the structure of the food we eat, what Spector calls the food matrix.
So how does that work?
Well, think about chewing. When we chew, we're breaking down the food structure, which affects how quickly the sugar gets released and absorbed into our bloodstream.
So eating a whole apple is different from drinking apple juice, even if they have the same amount of sugar.
Exactly. The apple's fiber and cell walls slow down the sugar release, while the juice is like a sugar rush straight to your bloodstream.
And that can lead to those crazy blood sugar spikes.
Yep. Spector also points out that we actually burn more calories digesting whole foods.
Oh, interesting. Why is that?
Our bodies have to work harder to break down those complex structures. It's like the difference between strolling on a flat surface and hiking up a hill.
Now let's get into the world of the gut microbiome and personalized nutrition. This is where Spector's work with ZOE has been truly revolutionary.
It has been.
Those Zoe Predict studies have given us so much insight into how our gut microbes, our health, and the foods we eat are all interconnected.
And for the first time, they were able to identify specific microbes that are consistently linked to better health outcomes.
So we're not just talking about gut health in general, we're talking about specific bugs that can influence our well-being.
Exactly. And they even found what you might call good and bad bugs.
So is it like a battle going on in our gut?
In a way, yeah. These microbes are constantly interacting with each other and with the food we eat, and they can influence how we metabolize fats and sugars.
So two people could eat the same meal, but their gut microbes could process it completely differently.
Absolutely. If you've got a diverse microbiome with a good balance of those good bugs, you're less likely to experience those harmful metabolic responses.
And those good bugs, when they're happy and well-fed, they produce all sorts of beneficial compounds, won't they?
They do. Things like butyrate and those short-chain fatty acids, or SCFAs.
Butyrate, that's the one that's good for our gut lining, right?
Yes, it helps to keep our gut barrier strong and prevents that leaky gut situation.
Which, by the way, Spector says has been a bit overhyped.
He does, yeah. While leaky gut is a real issue in some conditions, like inflammatory bowel disease, it's not as widespread as some people think.
So we don't need to be panicking about leaky gut unless we have a specific medical condition.
Exactly.
Now, those SCFAs, they're pretty amazing, aren't they?
They are. They provide energy for our gut cells, they signal to our immune system, and they can even help regulate our appetite.
And our gut microbes also produce essential vitamins like vitamin K and some B vitamins.
It's like having a tiny factory working inside us, churning out all these beneficial compounds.
Now, let's talk about polyphenols and fiber. We know they're good for us, but how do they actually work their magic?
Spector explains that they both have independent health benefits. Long-term studies have even shown that they can help with weight management over time.
That's impressive. And they also team up with our gut microbes, right?
They do. Some polyphenols are actually used by our microbes as fuel.
So it's like we're feeding our good bugs.
Exactly. And as a byproduct of that microbial feast, they produce those SCFAs we talked about.
So it's a win-win situation. We get the benefits of the polyphenols and fiber, and our microbes get a good meal.
It's a beautiful symbiotic relationship.
And those SCFAs, they really do so much, don't they?
They do. They nourish our gut cells, they help regulate inflammation and allergies, and they even influence our appetite hormones.
Now, fermented foods are having a bit of a moment, aren't they?
They are, and with good reason, especially those that contain live microbes.
So beyond the usual yogurt, what are some good examples?
Cheese, fermented tofu, kefir, kombucha, sauerkraut, kimchi. Spector calls them K-rations because of their health benefit.
K-rations, I love that.
And because they contain live microbes, they directly contribute to the diversity of our gut microbiome.
So eating fermented foods is like giving our gut a probiotic boost.
In a way, yeah.
Now, let's circle back to the UPPS. We know they're not great, but how exactly do they mess with our gut and our eating habits?
Spector says that in many Western countries, like the UK and the US, UPFs now make up over half of our daily calorie intake.
That's crazy.
It is. And despite being packed with calories, they're often low in nutrients. All those beneficial things we've been talking about, like fiber and polyphenols, they're mostly gone because the original ingredients have been so heavily processed.
It's like they've stripped out all the good stuff and left us with empty calories.
Pretty much. And food scientists have become masters at making these foods incredibly appealing.
Oh, I know. It's like they know exactly how to push our buttons.
They use emulsifiers to create creamy textures, artificial flavors to mimic real food, and all sorts of enhancers to make them super tasty.
So they're designed to be addictive.
It seems that way. They can mess with our gut microbes and make us crave more and more of them.
It's like they're hijacking our natural appetite control mechanisms.
Yeah, it's pretty scary when you think about it. And the exact way they do this is still being researched, but it likely involves both our gut and our brain.
Now let's talk about supporting our immune system. We're constantly bombarded with messages about boosting our immunity, but Spector has a different take on it.
He does. He says the only real way to dramatically boost your immune system is to get sick or get vaccinated.
So all those products that claim to boost immunity, are they just hype?
Well, a lot of those foods, like berries, mushrooms, green tea, nuts, they are nutritious and they can contribute to a healthy immune system.
But they're not going to suddenly make us invincible to disease.
No, Spector's approach is about supporting and balancing our immune system, making sure it's working at its best.
So what's his advice for doing that?
He recommends a diverse diet with plenty of fiber, lots of fruits and vegetables, good sources of protein, oily fish, healthy fats, and spices.
And he even mentions specific spices like cinnamon, rosemary, and cardamom.
Yeah, those are traditionally associated with extra benefits.
Now, Spector has some strong opinions about vitamin D supplementation,
He does. He used to prescribe it himself and even took it for years.
but now he's changed his mind.
Yeah, he's looked at the research and he's not convinced it's as beneficial as we once thought.
So all those claims about vitamin D preventing cancer and depression, they're not really backed up by the evidence.
Not really. There was a meta-analysis that showed a small reduction in respiratory infection risk, and the ZOE group found a slight link to lower COVID risk, but even that wasn't confirmed in a bigger study.
So his advice is to focus on getting vitamin D from sunlight and food rather than supplements.
That's his take, yeah.
Now let's talk about navigating the world of nutrition research. There's so much information out there and it's not always reliable.
It could be a minefield.
How do we know what to believe?
Spector warns us against taking any single study as gospel.
So just because one study says something, it doesn't mean it's true for everyone.
Exactly. We need to look at the bigger picture. And he gives this funny example of a study that suggested eating a few hazelnuts a day could dramatically increase lifespan.
And I'm guessing it's not that simple.
Nope. When you do the math, it just doesn't add up.
So we need to be critical of the claims being made.
Absolutely. And he also talks about how university PR departments can sometimes hype up study findings to get media attention.
So it's not always about the science.
No, sometimes it's about publicity, and then you've got all these online journals popping up, some with questionable peer review processes.
Meaning the quality of the research might not be as rigorous.
Exactly. Spector tells this story about a colleague who submitted a completely nonsensical paper to one of these journals, and it got accepted.
Oh my gosh. So it's buyer beware when it comes to nutrition research? Now, food labels, they're supposed to help us make informed choices, but sometimes they feel more like marketing tools.
They can be, yeah. Companies use all sorts of tricks to make their products seem healthier than they are.
Like those low-fat or no-added folder labels.
Yeah, those can be misleading. A product might be low in fat but loaded with sugar or artificial ingredients.
And then there are those fancy labels like DOP or Taste Awards.
Those can be tricky too. Some are legitimate, like DOP, which has strict regulations, but others are more about marketing than quality.
And then there's the whole issue of food fraud, which is pretty scary.
It is. Spector mentions that up to 50% of fish sold globally is mislabeled.
Wow, that's a lot.
It is. And he gives this example of ground almonds being adulterated with peanut powder. Someone with a peanut allergy could have a serious reaction.
That's terrifying. And he also talks about those fruit-flavored cereals that don't actually contain any real fruit.
Yeah, it's all just artificial flavors and colors. It's a reminder to always check the ingredient list.
Now, Spector makes a surprising case for canned food.
He does, yeah. People often think canned food is less nutritious, but he challenges that.
Really?
Yeah. The canning process, which involves steaming, sealing, and cooking, actually preserves the food pretty well.
But what about the nutrients?
Some water-soluble vitamins, like vitamin C, can be reduced, but surprisingly, many polyphenols actually increase after canning.
So those canned fruits and vegetables might be better than we think.
They can be. Plus, they're often more affordable and convenient.
Let's talk about fermentation. We've already covered yogurt and kefir, but what about other fermented foods?
Oh, there's a whole world out there.
I love fermented foods. They're so good for our gut.
They are. And the fermentation process itself can be beneficial. Like with dairy, it breaks down lactose, making it easier to digest for some people.
And kefir is especially good because it's got such a diverse microbial profile.
It does, yeah. But you've also got things like kombucha, which is made with a SCOBY, a culture of bacteria and yeasts.
I love kombucha.
And even coffee and chocolate undergo fermentation, which contributes to their flavor.
Wow, I never thought about that.
And of course, there's sourdough bread, which is fermented with wild yeasts and bacteria.
Sourdough is the best.
It is. It's got a unique taste, it's more nutritious, and it's easier to digest.
Now, let's compare homemade soup to those processed versions you get in cans or packets.
Oh, there's a big difference there.
Right.
Spector uses examples like Heinz vegetable soup and cup of soup. Those processed soups can be loaded with sugar, salt, and artificial ingredients.
And they're probably low in fiber and other nutrients.
Exactly. Making your own soup at home with fresh vegetables is way healthier.
It just makes sense.
It does.
So to wrap things up, what are some key takeaways from Food for Life?
Well, Spector emphasizes the importance of whole, minimally processed foods.
Eat real food, basically.
Yeah, and eat a wide variety of plants. Choose seasonal and local produce when you can, and reduce your meat consumption.
Especially red and processed meats.
Right. Be mindful of your oil intake, use safer materials for food storage, cook your vegetables lightly, and embrace fermented foods.
Great advice. So this deep dive has been all about giving you a better understanding of food and its impact on our health.
We hope you've gained some valuable insights and feel empowered to make more informed choices.
We've talked about the complexity of food, the amazing power of our gut microbiome, and the importance of looking beyond the hype and marketing.
It's all about understanding the connections between what we eat, our bodies, and the world around us.
And with that in mind, here's a final thought for you to chew on. What's one small change you can make in your eating habits this week? Something that will benefit not only you, but maybe even the planet. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll see you next time.
See you then.